Welcome to the 6th edition of FinTech Friday. We are glad you joined us this evening. Please welcome our host for the evening, Michelle Umurunji, the Senior Strategy and Policy Analyst at Rwanda Finance.
Good evening, everyone. This is going to be tough to be able to look on both sides, but I'll try as best as I can. Welcome to the 6th edition of FinTech Fridays. And perhaps we should let our panelists join before I could kick into it and kick us off. Shall we? Well, welcome on stage our panelist, Mr. Olivier Manzi, who is the head of service delivery, of operations at RSwitch Limited, and Raoul Ndayambaje, who is the head of digital banking and e-channels at Cogebanque. Sorry for that pause. We just wanted to make things dramatic because, you know, we started a little late, so. So, good evening again. My name is Michelle. I will be your host tonight. Pretty excited to be here, particularly because the FinTech Fridays editions haven't been happening since COVID. So this is the first since COVID and hopefully the first of many this year. For those of you who don't know what this FinTech Friday is, it's a community event that usually gathers entrepreneurs around the FinTech space, regulators, policymakers, to just come together, have a dialogue, discuss, and later have the opportunity to network. So tonight we'll be talking about an interesting topic, one that I dare say has the power to unleash digital economies across the continent, and that is the recently launched Pan-African payment system settlement. So we'll be discussing what it is, how it works, and how startups, SMEs, and fintechs in particular can work with it. So without further ado, I'd like to get this panel kicked off and start off with a question for Mr. Olivier. Olivier, welcome tonight. Welcome to the 6th edition of FinTech Friday. And while we're trying to figure out how that works, welcome to you as well, Raoul. Okay, seems like we're going to exercise our voices tonight. I hope you can hear me pretty well. I'll try as best to translate what our panelists are saying tonight.
Hello?
Welcome again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. Really pleased to be talking about this topic. I know there's some members in the audience who were excited to know more about it. I could tell they were asking, so what is this going to be about? So let's kick it off and have you explain in a few words. Can you share with us first what your institution does? You know, we said RSwitch, but what is RSwitch? What does it do? And the opportunity that the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, which is now acronymed PAPS, presents in achieving the mission of your organization.
Thank you. RSwitch is a payment service operator. We process transactions between banks, telecoms, e-wallets. In simple terms, we interconnect payment service providers in terms of payment. We mainly ensure interoperability on cards, ATMs, POS, then on this e-wallet, P2P transfers.
Okay. So, yeah. Great.
On PAPS, perhaps being a Pan-African cross-border payment systems, and we play a role of also interconnecting the Rwandan market to the other African markets on instant, reliable, and it's instant, reliable, then a very cheap payment.
Okay.
We use African currencies in PAPs. It's not transiting into euros or dollars. And Raul knows how well when they cross to those hard currencies, it's a pain for them as a banker.
Thank you. As you're talking about banking and translate forex, foreign exchanges when it comes to trading, I want to switch to Raul. I know this is a burning issue.
Distribute our product and services, and the way we interact with our customers is done in a digital way or using digital means. That's first. Now, when you add e-channels, it used to be called e-channels, but now it's more payments, because we are at a stage where payments is considered as a proper business line, or I mean, when I say business line, on top of credit, because most of us used to think of banks as only institutions that give out credits. So those are two things that I do, or I'm supposed to do. Now, from a past perspective, and when you look at a commercial bank, there are two things that a commercial bank do. It's either access to capital, giving credits to SMEs or individuals or large companies, and there's to allow the circulation of currency, because how an economy works, you have a central bank which issue a currency, and then money or currency will circulate through commercial banks. Because you companies, we have accounts in commercial banks, whether we send that money to each other either via digital currencies, or whether we go to withdraw it and I give it to each other, it will still be circulating in a commercial bank. So now, from a commercial banking perspective, if now instead of, if I'm to send money to Uganda so that I import some good coconut waragi, so now, do I need to have that flow passing to New York, or do I have it? Do I have this facility that the RA switch and the PAPs are bringing, where now it will be directly from Rwanda to Uganda? So that's why we are coming in, and that's what will be benefiting from it.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. There's another guest who is supposed to join us online. I'm not sure we'll be able to connect with him. Let me know if we can. He's a special guest for one reason. He's the Deputy CEO of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System within the Afrexim Bank, which is the African Trade and Import Bank. His name is Jean Bosco Sebabi. Is Jean Bosco able to join us tonight?
Yes, I am. I'm actually online.
Oh, great.
Can you see me?
Yes. Good evening, Jean Bosco. Thank you. Thank you for joining us
Share
online.
Thank you. And it's a very big pleasure to be with you and everybody else in that room.
Likewise. So I'd like to turn to you, Bosco, and we've just to set the context here. Could you, in a few words, share with us what your institution does, and give us background on the PAPS and its purpose?
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to discuss this subject that's at the core, the heart of intra-African trade today, to the community in Rwanda and elsewhere, that everyone following us. What is the rationale for setting up PAPS? That's what I'll start with. And what does it do, and what is it intended to do? Let's take a step back and look at what trade is today, or what the hurdles traders go through today to send money across. Raul just mentioned about the hurdle that traders go through to solicit for foreign currency before importing goods from neighboring countries. Now, when you look at intra-African trade as compared to other regions, intra-European trade is around 75%. Intra-Asian trade is about 57, close to 60%. These are the statistics in 2016. Now it should be much higher. Intra-American trade is also way above 50%. Intra-African trade is at 16%. Now, that means this how much countries in Africa trade with each other. And the rest of the trade is occurring with other continents or other regions in outside Africa. So the rationale of setting up the Pan-African payment settlement system was based on that fact that, well, we have low intra-African trade. How do we enhance it? The heads of state in 2019 signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in Kigali. And further in July of the same year, they set up its operating arm, the Secretariat, and they endorsed PAPS as a payment system for Africa. Meaning that for trade to occur, there had to be a robust payment system. And this payment system had to be based on African currencies and a payment system that was giving value to the payee, to the recipient in real time, instantly. So these are very important pillars on which PAPS is based. So what do? Today, we launched on 13th of January in an epoch-making event, which was really representing a start of a new era where Africa is transforming her payments infrastructure. Now, what does this mean for us? It means that we can now start to trade between ourselves using our currencies and then receiving value instantly. So I will stop there for now, and we can discuss what does and what's intended to do and the progress as we go along.
Thank you so much, Bosco. You've painted quite a clear picture there for us in terms of intra-Africa trade in comparison to other continents. And I think those were staggering numbers. So I want to turn to you, Olivier, for us to increase that number from 16% to a much higher number, perhaps 100% someday. I understand we need to connect the Rwandan e-payment switch to the PAPS. What will it take to successfully do that? And is there a clear timeline for that?
Thank you, Michelle. First of all, let's recognize Jean Bosco's role in payment systems in Rwanda.
Absolutely.
As he's the father of the RIPS we use. He's the one who also started this arrow switch we have. That time it was Simtel.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's upgrading what he did in Rwanda on an African level. So, and we know he will succeed as what he did in Rwanda succeeded as well. People who started with him in this audience know his role. Now, for your question, we as a switch, we ensure that we have robust systems, ensuring instant payment. That instant payment will be the only alternative to this cash because you receive funds immediately and you're ready to use them. Now, how we do it? We ensure that banks connected to our systems benefit and they don't reinvest to connect to PAPS. We're just telling them, add another menu on your systems. Whatever you've been doing, sending each other amongst yourself, will be the same message format. Then we route them to their countries. On timelines, I leave it to Jean Bosco, as they are the ones at the central. What we ensure is that we get ready as a switch. We are onboarded. It takes like 3 to 4 months. Then we start onboarding also commercial banks. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. And I endorse the fact that you wanted to give a big shout out to Bosco. I concur. This is really, he's the founding father, in few words. So thank you, Jean Bosco, for pushing for this to happen and to be a reality today. We'll come back to the timeline for this shortly. Raoul, I want to bring you back to the conversation as well. When we think of PAPs and entrepreneurs and SMEs that will be transacting and receiving the funding in their currencies, in the local currencies, what does that mean for a bank? What are the changes that will that bring upon your line of business?
Well, I would say that what it means for the bank, it's how the end customer will benefit from it. So now let's go back to what Bosco explained on, instead of having a payment going to what is now normally called as a correspondent bank, which is a foreign bank now, I mean in USD denominated currency, then you're having it being done in an African currency. So there are two things that you'll see on that revo, and I'll try to explain it in brief. First, whether it's a company paying another company, or you being paid for goods or services that you've sold, or whether it's me sending money to my aunt somewhere, those are two elements. So there's that intra-African trade, of which I think it's now around 69 billion USD. And there's what we call remittances, which me, I'm sending my money to my aunt, or my aunt is sending me money. It might be around 9 to 10 billion. So imagine that amount if now we don't rely on the cost that it takes us to exchange it into a hard currency, but rather, because I think in the way it has been set up, there's a certain overdraft line that has been put in place so that central banks can send currencies to each other without having any problem of defaulting. Now, if today a company sending money to another pays, I think it's around 1% of what you're sending, plus what in this country we call famously SWIFT fees. I think it's around $15 today. Now, take that cost and have it reduced. It might be 50% reduction, 60%, 80%, but there will always be a cost. Right. So now, if that reduces, it means that it will be the end customer who will be benefiting from it. That's for SMEs or people doing business. The same thing happens also for the remittances. If I'm sending money to my aunt, through the famous, now we have the Western Union, MoneyGram, all other things, there's also the same cost. So if you can assure that it's no longer being exchanged into dollars and now it's the same local currencies, that cost will, the cost of acquiring that currency will go down. At the same time, I also believe that the cost of doing that transaction will go down. So that's where I see the immediate benefits that will go to the end users. But don't think only that it's on that area, because the amount of money that is in circulation and that is within the banking system, that is sitting on your account or my account, has an impact on the rate that you'll be paying when you come to request for a loan. So if we can drive that the amount of currency, I will be interchanging currency and money, the amount of money that is in the banking system and sitting on our accounts, somewhere, somehow, I'm not saying that it will happen because that's a role of regulations, but by normal economic and monetary aspects, that they will have an impact now in the reducing the cost of fund that banks will pay to get the funds that will be lending to you and me. So those are the two immediate benefits that as banks will get, but which the end beneficiaries are our customers.
Great, I'm glad to hear, and I'm sure many members of the audience are glad to hear that the end customer will be a beneficiary for this as well. Jean Bosco, if you can hear us, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation as well. I'm not sure.
I've been following.
Perfect. As we eliminate the foreign intermediary, the correspondent banking, this could possibly not be an easy task. So I'd like to hear from you, what were the challenges as you were putting in place PAPS? And who are some of the stakeholders that you work with to put this into place, to make it a reality?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And let me start by, Olivier, I'm humbled by your statements that you mentioned. It was teamwork. Everybody in Rwanda and the banking sector participated, and we brought it to where it is. And we thank God for that, and we keep pushing. So, who are the major stakeholders in this? I must say that PAPS has received endorsement and support from many institutions, the AAA institutions, as we say. The Afrexim Bank that set it up, because in its own establishment agreement, the Afrexim Bank is empowered to set up a payment system and facilitate payments across the continent to promote intra-African trade and even extra-African trade. The AU has been very instrumental in this. The heads of state have endorsed this system and have recognized it as something that can pull and improve, increase intra-African trade. And more to which, the African Continent Free Trade Area Secretariat, who are very important partners. They support us in all ways because we are a strong pillar and the instrument of its implementation. So that support and those stakeholders have been there and they're there. Now, who do we work with to implement this? The way it is structured is a central bank centric system. That means central banks have a big role in this. It is central banks that supervise, that oversee payment systems. So the role of the central bank here is very important. So in terms of piloting, we had to pilot this in a region in Africa so that we can prove the concept. We have piloted this in the West African Monetary Zone. These are 6 countries: Nigeria, Ghana, the Gambia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Guinea. These are 6 countries. Now, these 6 countries represent the complex situation we find in Africa. And what is this complex situation we find in Africa? We find that Africa, we speak many languages. These are foreign languages, we must accept. This English, French, Portuguese, and Arab, and everything else. So we speak those many languages, but mainly French and English. So we have to pilot in a region that speaks those 2 languages, and also a region that has 6 currencies, so that we can prove how African currencies can work together, can be interchangeable and convertible in this kind of arrangement. And we also have 6 central banks, that means 6 regulators. This is where we started, in Wamsi, and this we succeeded and piloted it for the past 1-2 years, and now it is live, and we are working to integrate commercial banks in that region and fintechs. Now, the other stakeholders are, of course, the African Development Bank, which supports us in terms of collaboration, in terms of being shareholders in Afrexim Bank itself and being on our governing board. So the major stakeholders in this system are central banks, commercial banks, fintechs, and the institutional the institutions in Africa: AU, AFDB, Smart Africa, of whom we have an MOU, and other regional payment systems like COMESA, like is the East African Community, what we call the East African Payment System. These are strong partners in this, and we are all working with them to be able to promote this. So that's what I can say about stakeholders, and the others will be users, the economic operators who are going to come in to use this. So this is how the setup is structured.
Thank you so much, Jean Bosco. And I'm glad to hear that this was piloted in some African countries, and it has proven to be successful. And turn off your phone. I'm just kidding. I'd like to turn back to you, Olivier. He talked about users. There are many stakeholders here. There's the African Central Bank. There are central banks within and across African countries, all the multilateral organizations. But I know that national switches are also important as stakeholders. as he speaks about the users, what are some critical changes or immediate changes that entrepreneurs or fintechs can expect to see when, as we plan to connect to this infrastructure?
For SMEs, what they gain is when they used to receive like funds from Swift messages, it used to take like 2 or 3 days, maybe later. When funds are transiting in those banks, now it is instant. It's to be like when I send you Momo, you receive it immediately. From think of receiving funds from Ghana immediately when they send them. It's that for end users.
Simply put.
That's simple.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll be holding you to your word.
Okay, probably as a switch, what we ensure is we ensure clearing, but settlement is done through central banks. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned the central bank.
Yes. On our case is BNR.
Absolutely. And just actually was about to talk to a financial institution, a bank, about the regulator. Often someone we all fear, but it shouldn't be the case. And mid last year, the parliament passed a law governing payment systems, which empowers, as though they didn't have enough power, the central bank to enforce interoperability. Let me say that one more time. Interoperability. Hard word, guys. I want to debunk that because it speaks to what he was saying, settlement. And I want to focus on our market first before we even connect to the broader markets across the board. Can you tell us what interoperability means? Why it's important in relation to PAPS?
Thank you. So I'll try to make it easy and in the same logic that Olivier started in it. So take all payment services providers. We might be 100 or 2 or 3. But normally if tomorrow I decide to quit where I am and start a payment service that I can offer to you only and Olivier, I'm not binded by any regulation or there's no enforcement that will ask me to make sure that the payment service that is offered by Shema talks to mine. Right. So if now we go into, interoperability is enforced, it's that for all payment service providers, that they're interoperable. That's why I would say it. So one can send to another. That's in the easy ways of take Momo to Airtel Money or Airtel Money to MTN Mobile Money. Now, so that's first. Second, will you ask why will it be enforced or why is it a need to enforce it? Again, it will come back to either the cost that it takes for those that are not interoperable, because at the end of the day, this is benefiting the end users or the end customers. So the cost that it will take to end customers or end users to either be in a position to use one or another, or that they benefit good things that on other parts, you will find that the cost is high. But when interoperability is enforced, it comes to a cheap cost to, low cost to all the participants.
Understood. All right, I think he wants to piggyback off of what you said. Go ahead, Olivier.
Yes, mainly for FinTech. For example, if they want to give to their customers payment services through their platforms, if there is no interoperability, to allow them to collect or to pay, they have to connect to multiple people. But if there's interoperability, there will be one single point they can hook on, then everyone can pay them through that one connection. So it will be cost effective for those fintechs. It will be cost effective for also the service providers, even utilities, to collect from one single point. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. And if I understand correctly, now that we'll be connecting to the PAPs, it will also be happening in real time.
Yeah, that's real time. PAPS is on African level, but in Rwanda, they
Right.
can also connect to one of the interoperable systems. For retail, it's through the Rwandan initiative called RNDPS. It's a Rwanda National Digital Payment Systems, which is gradually going live. Currently, there's a pilot phase between Airtel and MTN. Soon they will announce to the public, and the banks also are part of it. That one will change the game, believe me. So
Right.
from that one, you also ensure interoperability of any payment. You don't need to have like 3-4 POS at a merchant level. Yeah, one can acquire all of them. For people who have platforms, they just hook on one, they can acquire any payment systems. That's the beauty of interoperability.
Awesome. I know that's a pain for a lot of us. Many of the people in the audience can relate to when you go to a restaurant and you have to ask for, do you have equity? Do you have BK? So I hope that that will, in the future, let's not say right now, help us avoid having to ask for many POSs. Back to you, Jean Bosco. I want to. We've talked about PAPS and all its benefits and how it works. Can you now, looking towards the future, can you set the scene for us and tell us what trends you expect to see in the next 5 years in intra-Africa trade?
Thank you, Michelle. That's that's a very interesting question, Michelle. When you asked what you see in 5 years, usually it's not very difficult to project, but in terms of IT and the technology and where we move, sometimes it can be challenging because technology changes all the time. But this is what we expect. We expect that all central banks in Africa will be on board because maybe let me just take a step back and run the process of PAPs. We have central banks at the level of the settlement, at the settlement level. They are the settlement agents for their jurisdictions. The National Bank of Rwanda is going to be the settlement agent for Rwanda, and Central Bank of Kenya, South African Reserve Bank, like that. Now, I expect that all these banks should be on board, and we should have majority of the commercial banks on board as well. Now, there's a very interesting phenomenon that's happening in Africa, or maybe even in the world, and mostly in the developing world. The FinTech. FinTechs are taking center stage. So I expect that PAPS is a rail that any payment service provider can come and ride on. It's a road for every car to drive through and be able to deliver passengers wherever they're going to be able to deliver services. So the PAPS rails, I expect that fintechs are going to take advantage and do cross-border business. Many times fintechs are hindered by the lack of a settlement platform where they can transfer money from one economy to the other. We've been told many times, and some research shows that African currencies are not convertible into the other. That means if you move from here to Congo, you cannot easily change Rwandan francs into Congolese francs. So you need a third currency, which is a dollar or a euro to do that. Now, this has hindered fintechs to grow. And we expect that in the next couple of years, maybe even less than 5 years, we will see the fintechs growing enormously because of these rails that perhaps offers to them and this facility of settlement that's offering to them. We've had discussions with a couple of them, even aggregators. We currently have an agreement with the MFS Africa that does this. And the hurdle comes with the settlement, which now perhaps comes into Zob as one of the services that we do offer on our platform. So where I expect to be in 5 years is that we'll have PAPS as a household name in the banking sector in Africa and even outside Africa, and also having all central banks as members. And then at that point in time, we'll be facilitating African currencies to be converted onto the other, and hence facilitate trade. And also, lastly, the growth in the fintech world. We do expect enormous growth in this area.
Thank
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Jean Bosco. It sounds like the future is bright from what you describe, and I sure hope to see that number that you told us earlier increasing in the next 5 years. I'm looking at time, and I'm conscious of time. I know we started a bit late, so I don't want to keep us here late. I know curfew has been extended. Some of you might have plans. So I want to ask one last question. If there's only one thing you hope that the audience tonight takes away as a result of our conversation, what would it be? And I'll start with Raoul.
Well, only one thing. Well, let me start by many things that I will end with one thing. So we've been talking about PAPS only in the angle of payments, whether it's trade or business, trade payments and remittances. But when you take a financial system on a broader perspective, there are other areas. So you have, trade payments, you have remittances that we've talked about. Imagine if we can trade also securities in Africa and that the same platform can handle it. Let me keep point to Shema, and if Shema decides to save fabric in 2 years, and someone in Nigeria wants to buy share, you can use the same rails as Bosco has put it. So you can have private securities or even public securities. The same thing it can pass through the same system, and even on somewhere close to a dream, even the cash transactions that you do. When you go to Uganda and you do a card transaction, it's considered as international transaction. What if we make it an African transaction? So you see, the opportunities are immense. So, and those opportunities will not be exposed to the public by either the processors of the kind of the RS switch. However much also we would like it to do as a commercial bank, we will do a small portion of it, because whether regulations, whether the way we operate. And that opportunity is in hands of fintechs. So for all fintech guys and ladies and girls, so it's, the future is, I can't, if we were to quantify it, it will be, that's where one has to be. So fintech will do miracles for us. Shema.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we're here and it's called FinTech Fridays, because that really speaks to our audience tonight. Over to you, Olivier.
Thank you. One thing, it's hard. I can say instant payment across Africa is happening. Yes, that's one takeaway.
That's quite the statement to end with. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the close and end of our conversation tonight. But I would like to open it up to you, for you to ask questions, share your comments, your thoughts. This is a safe space for dialogue. I'm sorry I've been turning my back to you guys, but I'll switch. I'll come back to you. Are there any questions in the audience? Are there thoughts, comments?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Pepita. I work at Pesa Choice FinTech here at Norsken. So if I understand correctly, PAPS is a EBS, correct?
Pepita, could you, acronyms sometimes are hard to understand. What is an EBS?
Well,
If I
it's
may.
a system that allows for communications around different banks.
Well, in full length, the
Well,
word.
Sure. Well, basically, it's a bus system, and it allows for different connections across different banks within the financial sector. But really, my question is, have you calculated exactly how much money you're losing in transaction when you're not transacting with Western currencies?
And who would you like to extend your question to?
Any of these gentlemen could answer that question, for sure.
All right, my guess is it's going to go to the financial institution, banking. Raul, over to you.
Well, I don't have an exact number of what it costs or what savings are made when banks are transacting in hard currencies. But remember, if you start from a conceptual perspective, the concept is even for you to be, I mean, you hear every time it's in economy when they say, I mean, in the financial news when they say that the country reserve is X. So meaning that for, as a country for us, I mean, depending on what is our balance of payment, I mean, what you import and what you export. So if you are told that your reserve of payment is X, I think there is a constraint that is putting to you as a country because you need to have that reserve of payment in a certain currency. So it's constraining you as a country. Now, in ideal situations, quote unquote, so if the PAPS is operating at its fullest and Olivier has put in place everything that needs to be in place so that payments are instant, and he will do, and he has done it. And now, as a country, instead of getting my sneakers from Tanzania, I can get the same sneakers from Mozambique. So now, because the way I mean, in a payment system, there are two sides. I think that's something that Bosco has been pointing on. There's what is called clearing, or EBS, as you said, which is a bank A telling bank B, pay X such amount of money. But also there's that settlement that Bosco also hinted on, which happens between central bank, which is the actual movement of funds. Now, it means that as a country, I'm not constrained only on that balance of payment of X currency of X amount that I have because of the way it operates, because of what Afrexim has put in place to guarantee the payments to happen. We are more, I mean, we are not, as a country, you will not be more constrained. So that's how I will put it due to how you've asked the question.
Great. I will quickly turn to this side and see if there's any questions. All right. I'll ask that you quickly tell us your name and tell us who you want to direct your question to.
Okay, my name is Ernest Kanamura. I'm representing Hexacomb and Nokanda app. My question is in regards to, actually there's two parts. The first part is I'm excited to hear about interoperability and the payments and scaling it not just in one country, because it's difficult just to do that in one country, but across all the African countries. One thing I would hope, and my question is that we approach this from let's say, a developer-centric. I know it takes a lot of political will to get the frameworks in place, but to really make it happen, you need to have the right tools and information for the developers to create all the different apps and linkages to make this a reality. So a suggestion is to have good APIs and documentation. So it's not in a long PDF and you need to go read a concept note and get information in a closed room. Things should be open. Somebody should be able to read it. if there's any compliance or KYC, it should be just very clear. I mean, people interact with PayPal and Stripe, and they do that across borders very fast, and they never have to meet with you in person. So I hope that we don't hinder ourselves by making things very closed loop and accelerate our innovation in the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. I really echo your thought here. I think we're going past the rigid systems that we have in place and putting things in PDFs and closed behind closets. I think Olivier wants to address and take your question. Is that who you were directing it to?
As it is technology oriented, let me take it.
Please,
Yes.
please.
When you start talking APIs, things like that.
It excites you. I
uh,
see it. Go for it.
That's my area. PAPS at its level, they are on ISO 222. It's an interbank messaging systems. But for fintechs, as they'll be interacting mostly with local switches, uh, local switches have the mandate to facilitate you with those open APIs, because the way ISO 222 is structured, it's not really easy for most of fintechs to digest. We saw it, we are implementing it in another project. Even for banks, it's somehow difficult. So there's a way we collect from fintechs on an open API, easy to digest, with their jargon of languages they can understand. Then we translate into what PAPS can understand. As a switch, this is what we do. Yeah.
And I think, Ernest, you can continue the conversation perhaps after and share how your suggestion could be put in place. Because I think it's a great suggestion. I'm going to turn to this side, take one question, and then turn back again here. You know what? Go for it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hamza Katende, founder Q Africa, which is a business magazine. So we write about business in Africa. For me, as much as PAPS is interesting, or the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is interesting, I believe we as African countries we are still far apart when it comes to policy. Is this something that is going to be, is it going to meet its objectives if at policy level we are at different levels? For example, are we still going to have double taxation if Rwanda is building a financial district and it's embarking on signing agreements with Qatar or Luxembourg, but it's not doing with Uganda? Uganda is not really financial. At the end of the day, if my bank, if I'm still having issues with withdrawing money, if I withdraw money and it shows money has been deducted, but I don't get the money, but then it takes 5 days for me to actually have this resolved. I like the argument that he passed on. He says the system, it's instant, but the settlement is dependent of the bank. So is the infrastructure of the banks changing? Is this going to be effective at the end of the day if my settlement is not happening as quickly as possible? I'm going to, the border, Katuna border has been opened. If I choose to have this on my system, I'm going to trade or something. Someone sent me money from Rwanda to Uganda, and then the money is supposed to, because of a different bank or something, it's supposed to reflect later. Is it going to work? Again, with the structure of how this has been done, why Afrexim Bank? Is Afrexim Bank talking for all banks in Africa? Is it the bank that is governing all banks? Why the African Union? Has the African Union lived by its objectives over time? We published an article, again, an investigative article today on if the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is going to meet its objectives at the end of the day. Yeah, so this goes to, I think, both of them.
Well, I beg to differ. I think we might first want to address this to Jean Bosco, as he's the founding father of this infrastructure. Quickly, before I hand it over to Jean Bosco, you talked about double taxations and harmonizing policies. I think the beauty of tech is sometimes it transcends, all the rigid policies that we have in place. It has this agility to it, an ability to just do things fast. And I don't want to speak too much on it. I wanted to quickly rephrase and make sure that I capture well what you said to Jean Bosco, who's online. I hope he's still with us. Jean Bosco, are you still with us?
Yes, Michelle, I'm still with you.
Great. I'd like to address this to you. He asked about that there being a lack of harmonization with our policies and regulation among African countries. Could that hinder the implementation of PAPs and not make it successful? And there was also, I believe that's the essence, the crux of the question. I can talk to you about DTs later. Over to you, Jean Bosco.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for that question. Let me take two questions. I've been listening very keenly. There's a question that came from somebody about have we looked at the losses we're incurring today in terms of the present cross-border banking arrangement? Yes, we have estimated a couple of things before starting PAPs. We estimated what losses are being incurred. Two issues come here. There's the issue of delaying. Today, a payment from Burundi to Rwanda may take about 5 days, 3 to 5 days. So that delay is a cost itself. But also in terms of the charges, it has been estimated that Africa globally, whether businesses, individuals put together, will lose about $5 billion a year annually. So that itself is bigger than many GDPs of many economies in Africa. So you can see that kind of saving we might make if we make PAPs work. Now, turning to the gentleman's question about policies and Afrexim Bank, why Afrexim Bank, and AU has it been effective? Now, Afrexim Bank, the African Export-Import Bank, is a multinational, a multilateral institution put in place by African states, purposely to make sure that they provide financing to trade finance, a trade finance institution for Africa. Now, in its establishment, to be able to enhance and grow intra-African trade, it was given the power to facilitate payment arrangements. And so by that, that's why PAPs came up. And came up at the advent of the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So, of which the Secretariat has been formed, and now it's working with PAPs to be able to implement this. Now, turning to policy. Very many times we've read in literature that what hinders African trade is about, intra-African trade is about, we don't have roads, we don't have electricity, we don't have airports, very good things. Non-tariff barriers, all of them have been listed. Taxes have been listed amongst. However, there's something that is happening today across borders. If you look at the border between Rwanda and Congo, how much trade goes there? It's actually estimated to be around $450 million. But this is informal trade that probably Raul and the rest of the banks don't see that money in the banking sector. This is between Tanzania and Rwanda, it's about $250 million. All these are statistics that are there within the central banks about informal trade. Now, this shows you that whether the policies are there or not, people across borders are trading. Now, what can we do to facilitate that kind of trade? We've forgotten some kind of soft infrastructures. We've looked at roads, we've looked at electricity, tariff barriers, and all that, but we have not looked at the soft bits of it. That's the payment system, how people can trade very well, can pay to each other. Because once you ensure that value can move from one country to the other, one trader to the other, buying goods or services. That's the gist of the matter. That's where everything is hinged. So then, if we can facilitate that smooth flow of funds, smooth flow of value, that will unlock the opportunities. We've had discussions with several traders, several economic operators, and they've said why they trade with Europe, with America. It's because they can transfer money easily there. They can sit on their computers and transfer money there. So that means the payment system plays a very big role. Not disregarding the other factors, but it shows you how the payment system is very vital in this kind of arrangement. So yes, policies have been done, harmonizations there, not there, but this is a very important uh, factor. Now, that does not mean that we have not looked at the policy elements. We have looked at them, and at the level of AU and the level of the African, uh, the Association of African Central Banks, the AAC, what we call the AACB, we are speaking about this and how we can look at different regulations that concern cross-border payments, so that we can look at them, harmonize them, and see how things can move on. But this, irrespective of that work going on, we are moving on to implement a system, and because things are happening today, and the best we can do is to make sure they happen efficiently, and then we can unlock that policy, that regulation, that law, and everything else. So what he says is true. Maybe there may be no policy, but that should not be able, should not hinder progress at the business level. So that's what I can say about that. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Jean Bosco. Really appreciate your answer. I hope that was a satisfactory answer. So, wow, we'll come back to that. Question here. Mike, please.
Hello. Okay, it's on.
Hi.
Question is for Jean Bosco. It's regarding.
Sorry, could you tell us your name?
Yes, sorry. My name is Ludovic Bernard. I often trade through in the region and am often asked for hard currency when paying. So it's really interesting to see PAPs come up. But one question is, who determines the cross rate on these currencies? Because we often see huge spreads on, let's say, currencies that are not often traded with one or the other. And in markets where the currencies are generally illiquid, let's say the Burundian franc, the Ethiopian birr, who will guarantee that that transaction actually is able to go out? And I think, and that's on that level. And on another level is the messaging system set up for documentary credits.
Questions. Thank you. Jean Bosco, back to you. And
thank you very much.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's a very practical question, and thank you for that. Yes, the way the system is set up is that the central banks are the settlement agents for their economies. So that means if the National Bank of Rwanda is a participant in PAPs, and there are certain trades that have happened on the Rwandan territory, the inflows and outflows, there will be a net position. Now, there will be that settlement at the local level, that position is settled in local currencies. Now, what happens is that the net position, to say that Rwanda has imported so much from Kenya and Kenya has exported so much. If say the net is, if Rwanda has imported about $100 million and Kenya has exported maybe 80, so that means that the net, that's the balance net, is $20 million. Now, for a start, that will be settled in dollars. But we're working on an exchange rate mechanism whereby these currencies should be able to convert into each other. And what does that mean? That means that it's the central bank to determine that kind of exchange rate. The central bank has got the power. Here we must look at what the central bank is, the regulator of the financial sector. Absolutely. And this power comes in everywhere. Michelle just reminded us about the new law that's up for central banks to oversee payment systems. This has been there and will always be there. So the central banks have got a big role to play, and actually perhaps the central bank-centric system, whereby central banks play a big role in determining all that. Now, talking about currencies that are totally inconvertible, you've given some examples. There are two levels. There are producers in an economy who don't need foreign currency to buy. They don't. That means the ingredients of what they use or the raw materials that they use in producing whatever they export. They buy them locally. Those kind of individuals need local currencies. And if one pays in hard currency, that means they are going to have the trouble to go and change that local currency into a foreign currency into a local currency, and hence putting pressure on the on the exchange rate of that particular currency in the country. So if they receive their payments in local currency, they will be better off. So we start with that. And we're not saying that perhaps is going to affect every trader, because there are those that have 95% of their raw materials bought from Europe, from US. Those will need dollars. And that will be an external payment out of Africa. But we're saying that if the trader needs local currencies and there's a constraint in the economy of getting hard currencies, why can't they receive in local currency and be able to transact? So that's the level of operation. And we are working honestly and very seriously with central banks to be able to talk through all these issues. We've had several meetings with the National Bank of Rwanda, and they're moving so swiftly into this direction to be able to integrate into PAPS and then iron out all those kind of forex issues that are happening. And this is something that we believe will take place soon. So as you trade, know that PAPS has come in, and all these things have to be managed, have to be worked out between ourselves and central banks. And not only the National Bank of Rwanda we are speaking to all the East African central banks. And they are very keen to join this, because ultimately what happens is that the economy saves the dollars. If the economy was paying out $100 million in terms of imports, that means, and maybe exporting 50, the balance in 50 is what will be paid out. So that means there's a very big saving in terms of forex. And Raul just talked about reserves and stuff like that. This is where we are looking at. We are not looking at today, we are looking at down the road, what's going to happen to Africa. How do we quicken, fast track this? How do we work to have African currencies strengthened? Because the use of the third currencies in our trading has weakened our own currencies. So we need to have that also captured. So I hope that answers your question, sir.
Somewhat. A lot of somewhats tonight. But we'll keep the conversation going, and there's many more FinTech Fridays to happen. So I think, Raul, this is a topic that speaks to your heart as well. I'll let you comment on it.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, the documentary credit. Oh,
We were coming to that.
I will not say that I'm the best placed to respond exactly to it, but I will give my view, and I think also John Bosco can touch on it. But if you look on, those instruments, because we've been talking about open accounts, me paying who, paying X. But when you look on documentary credits, I think this is something that Afrexim has been helping most of the local, most of the commercial banks on the continent, and most of us have received very generous lines from them. Maybe what we would have liked John Bosco to touch on, or maybe what will be the discussion for another day, is now how or when, because I think it's a matter of when are we routing those messages or that messaging within PAPS instead of having it through SWIFT. But again, technically, I would say technically, even though that part is for Olivier, I believe that the infrastructure that can support the open account payments from can also those trade instruments. So I think it's a matter of time than for our intra-African trade instrument that we no longer channel it through SWIFT and we channel it through PAPS, even if when you look at what is happening between Russia or other things. Again, it can bring other things, but I believe that this system itself is able to support it.
So much, Raoul, for adding for responding to the second question. I'm not sure if Jean Bosco wants to comment, but I know Olivier, you seem like you want to add. Jean Bosco first. Great. Jean Bosco, is there something that you would like to add on to what Raoul just shared?
Yes, thank you. And let me add to what, sorry, I didn't touch that second part of the question, but perhaps started, and what we're looking at was to facilitate that flow of money. But as we discussed with participants, as we discussed with commercial banks especially, the idea of supporting the exchange of instruments, the exchange of documents and the payments, and also having this kind of confirmation going through the same process has come out as very important. So what we are going to do, we are now working at a way of also looking at how we can automate that, digitalize it, and then link it to PAPs. So that now you can have a flow from end to end. So yes, initially we hadn't looked at that part of the documentations, exchange of documentations, but now we are seriously looking into it to integrate so that it becomes one flow and a smooth flow. Thank you. That's what I wanted to update and respond to the gentleman's question.
Thank you, Jean Bosco. Ludo? Satisfied, all right? We're getting closer to, not somewhat, but satisfied. One last question. I'd like to hear from a lady again. Sorry, guys. And I see a hand here. Please, go for it.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the interesting conversation. And my question is...
sorry?
Sorry?
Your names?
Oh, sorry. My name is Julia. I'm co-founder of Centwise. We are based here in norrsken, so we are bridging the funding gap for micro traders in Africa by building an alternative collateral that they can present to financial institutions and get funding. So my question is, what do you envision the costs to the final consumer to be like when you're using PAPs? Because I know like in Kenya, you can send through M-Pesa Global directly to, Rwanda, MTN, and mobile money, but the costs are crazy. So, instant payments also come with, across the borders, also come with, with crazy costs. So,
back to you, Raoul. I think you're best placed to answer this. You touched on costs during our discussion.
Well, I touched on it, and I'll give out the concept, then we can talk about the exact number. So, look, what happens, whether it's with the M-Pesas or with others that you're transferring from one entity to another, one of the elements that makes the cost being high is the number of middle players that are in. So when you're transferring from M-Pesa to MTN Mobile Money, it's not only just M-Pesa and MTN Mobile Money. So there are several players that are in between, and everyone is not doing it for free. So they will need to take their cut. Now, the concept and the objective of PAPs will be that as it will be the central bank of the sending country and the central bank of the receiving country, then ideally you have the numbers of players being reduced, hence a reduction of cost. I will not be able to speak to the exact number of what will be the cost of maybe an intra-Africa person-to-person transaction or business-to-person or business-to-business transaction. But the idea is that it should be lower compared to what we have now. And I think maybe Jean Bosco will be sending us more details about that.
You? Jean Bosco, is there a number we can get from you or an estimate?
Michelle, okay. Now, the objective of setting up apps from the Afrexim Bank point of view is not to charge or make money from the system. It's for the system to grow into African trade, as we said. And that said, we are cutting out many middlemen, as Rahul just mentioned. But there's also a very important factor that is involved when transferring money from one country to the other. It's a question of converting that currency into another, whereby you use a third currency. That means the Rwandan franc is changed into the dollar, and then from the dollar into the Kenyan shilling. That cost is a bit high. So what we're saying is that we are now cutting that out and making sure that this is at the low cost. But also, our fees will be based on purely to make sure that transactions go through, because the aim of setting it up is to make sure that trade is enhanced. So yes, transactions will be at the minimum. Transaction costs will be at the minimum.
Cool.
Thank you, Michelle.
I mean, to a certain extent, we need to even appreciate what has happened. Because normally, for a bank to send money to another bank, there need to be somewhere something that is backing that transaction. And I think, John Bosco, if what I've seen is correct, Afrexim has backed this system by 1.2 billion, I think, or 12 billion. So that whoever comes in to participate in, at least has a comfort that what we'll be sending, if it's to receive something, also receive that thing. So that will respond to that question that was raised, and at least to have an appreciation of what has been done in preparing for this.
Thank you, Raul. Julia, I think, like I said, the future looks really bright, so watch out for it. I know there are burning questions. Unfortunately, looking at time is not on our side, and we're going to have to cut this short. But there is a cocktail, so I want you to keep these questions so you can network and chat with our panelists today to keep the conversation going. You know, we don't have to address everything tonight on this panel. Unfortunately. Let's continue the discussion offline. What I do want to ask of the audience is, like I said, these events happen every other month, the last day of the month. And because it's a dialogue, because we expect you to be part of it and be interested in what we have to discuss, we want you to choose the topic. I know the team has something to put on the screen for you to do. And propose your topic for the next FinTech Friday. It could be a continuation of, you know, our subject today, or something else that sparks your interest specifically in relation to FinTech. So you can go to, the first step is to go to paulev.com, enter, I think that's a code, enter the code, respond to activity. You know, usually we say, don't use your phones in events like this, but please use your phones. Take your phones and take a few minutes to respond. This is important for us so that we can have engaging conversations and dialogue with you. And as you're doing that, I just want to quickly thank our panelists. Thank you for being generous with your thoughts, your comments. John Bosco, I know you're in a different, not time zone, but slightly different time country, and ours are different. So thank you for joining us online and for responding to the questions that we've asked of you today. And this brings us to the end, to the close of our event. I really want to thank you for being so attentive. I know it could be a complex and technical discussion, but I sense that you were all attentive and took something away from it. If you didn't, I welcome you to continue the discussion over a cold, refreshing drink. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for being part of this evening discussions. We hope to be with you again for the next edition. Thank you for being part of this evening discussions. We hope to be with you again for the next edition.